At 41 minutes past 5 on a cold winter afternoon in 1947, a radio operator in Santiago, Chile, pressed his headphones tight and copied down a single word in Morse code. It made no sense to him. He tapped back a query, asking the aircraft to repeat. The operator aboard the plane sent it again, clean, deliberate, unhurried, and then a third time, STENDEC. 4 minutes after that final signal, the airliner should have been descending gently onto the runway below him. Instead, it flew into nothing. No wreck, no wreckage, no bodies. For more than 50 years, the mountains gave back not a single rivet, only that one strange, unexplained word. This is the story of Stardust and of the message that outlived everyone who heard it. To understand how a modern airliner could simply cease to exist, you have to understand the machine and the moment. In the summer of 1947, Britain was broke, battered, and desperate to matter again. One answer was the air. A new company, British South American Airways, was flying the long, glamorous routes down to Argentina and Chile, and it was doing so with an aircraft born of war. The Avro Lancastrian was a Lancaster bomber with its gun turrets stripped out and a handful of seats bolted in where bomb racks used to hang. It was fast, it was long-legged, and it had been designed to cross Germany in the dark, not to thread the highest mountains on Earth in daylight. Stardust carried the registration G-AGWH, and on the 2nd of August she left Buenos Aires bound for Santiago with 11 people aboard, 6 passengers and a crew of 5. Most of them ex-RAF men who had survived the war only to keep flying. Between them and their destination stood the Andes, a wall of rock and ice rising past 20,000 feet. There was only one safe way across: climb high, above the weather, and hold a heading until the peaks fell behind you. The crew had done it before. The aircraft was sound. The forecast was poor over the mountains, with heavy cloud, but nothing that should have troubled an experienced captain in a capable machine. And yet, buried in that ordinary flight plan was a killer nobody in that cockpit could have named. In 1947, meteorologists were only just beginning to grasp that at the altitudes these aircraft flew, rivers of air moved at astonishing speed, narrow, invisible torrents we now call the jet stream. Over the Andes, a headwind of well over 100 miles an hour could be blowing straight into an aircraft's nose. Above solid cloud with no landmarks and no radar, a navigator had no way of feeling it. He would calculate his position from airspeed, heading, and time, and if a monstrous wind was quietly stealing his forward progress, every one of those calculations would be wrong. Remember that. It is the whole story, though nobody understood it for decades. Stardust climbed to 24,000 feet and pushed into the cloud. The radio operator, a young man named Dennis Harmer, kept up a steady conversation with the ground. The messages were routine: position, altitude, and estimated arrival time. Then came the last transmission. Harmer signaled that they expected to be over Santiago at 5:45, and he ended, as operators did, with a short sign-off in Morse. Except this sign-off was a word no one recognized: STENDEC. The Chilean operator, puzzled, asked him to confirm. Harmer sent it back, twice, exactly the same. The taps were crisp and confident. There was no sense of alarm, no distress call, nothing hurried. It was the calm hand of a man who believed he was almost home. He was not almost home. At the moment Harmer tapped out that final word, Stardust was not gliding over the city. She was still deep in the mountains, dozens of miles short, hidden inside cloud and descending. The crew believed they had already crossed the Andes. The vicious headwind had held them back so severely that their careful dead reckoning had put them far ahead of their true position. They were letting down toward what they thought was the Chilean plain. In front of them, unseen, stood the ice-armored flank of a mountain called Tupungato. Nothing more was ever heard. When the plane failed to arrive, search aircraft combed the ranges for days. They found nothing, not a scar on the snow, not a glint of metal. It was as if the sky had closed over Stardust and sealed itself. And into that vacuum of evidence rushed something human and irresistible: the need for a story. That single word, STENDEC, became the seed of half a century of speculation. It had arrived clear and repeated 3 times, which meant it wasn't a slip of the hand. So what was it? People rearranged the letters and found they were an anagram of dissent, as if the doomed crew had somehow foretold their fall. Others read it as a coded acronym, a secret military signal, or the panicked shorthand of men who saw something in the cloud they could not explain. And because there was no wreck, the theories grew stranger. The plane had been sabotaged. It had been carrying something valuable and been made to disappear. It had, some insisted, been taken, lifted out of the sky by a passing craft not of this world. A vanished airliner and a cryptic last word were the perfect ingredients for a mystery that refused to die. But here is where the story turns, because for all its strangeness, the truth had been sitting patiently in one place the entire time, slowly moving downhill. When stardust struck the mountain, she almost certainly hit high on a slope thick with snow. The impact triggered an avalanche that buried the wreckage instantly and completely. That is why the search planes found nothing. There was nothing to see. The aircraft had not vanished into the air at all. It had vanished into the ice. And a glacier is not a grave that keeps still. Year by year, it flows, grinding downhill, carrying whatever it swallows toward the lower valleys, and eventually spitting it back out. In the late 1990s, mountaineers on the Tupungato Glacier began finding things that did not belong there. A twisted piece of aircraft, a Rolls-Royce engine, scraps of wartime-era metal emerging from the melting ice, more than 50 years and a good distance downhill from where the aircraft had actually died. In 2000, an Argentine army expedition climbed to the site to recover what the glacier had surrendered. Among the debris were pieces of the propellers, and more soberly, human remains, preserved by the cold, returned at last to daylight after half a century inside the mountain. The wreckage told investigators what no anagram ever could. The propellers had been under power and turning fast at the moment of impact. This was not a plane falling out of control, but one flying level and firm, straight into a slope its crew never saw. The engineering pointed, coldly and completely, back to that invisible wind. The jet stream had robbed stardust of ground she thought she'd covered. Confident they had cleared the Andes, the crew descended into them instead. Every calculation had been honest. Every calculation had been wrong. It was not sabotage, and it was not aliens. It was physics that the science of 1947 had not yet learned to fear. And what of STENDEC, the word that started it all? Even now, no one can say for certain. The most sober explanation is the least dramatic. A fast, fatigued hand at the Morse key, tapping a standard sign-off that arrived garbled at the far end, mistaken by a listener who had never seen that particular operator's rhythm before. Some believe it was a routine end-of-message code, run together and misread. There is no secret in it, most likely, only the ordinary noise of a tired man doing his job in the last minutes of his life, mistaken by history for a prophecy. Why then was Stardust forgotten? Because within 2 years, British South American Airways was gone, folded into BOAC after a run of losses, and the men who might have kept the memory alive scattered. The war had taught a generation not to dwell on aircraft that failed to return, and the mountain kept its secret so well for so long that by the time it gave up the wreck, almost everyone who had waited for that plane was dead. The mystery outlived the morning. There is one final quiet cruelty in it. For decades, the world reached for the extraordinary. Abduction, conspiracy, a coded warning from the doomed, when the real answer was more haunting than any of them. 11 people flew calmly and competently toward a city they believed lay just ahead, brought down not by malice or the supernatural, but by a wind no instrument on board could measure and no textbook had yet described. The last word Stardust ever spoke wasn't a message from the beyond. It was the sound of men who thought they were safe, and the mountain simply closed over the answer and waited 50 years for the ice to say it out loud. Stardust fell silent, and the ice kept its answer for 50 years. What secret did the next lost flight take with it? Watch the next story on screen now.